Welcome to this explainer. Okay, so today we're unpacking a concept that might just completely rewire how you view wealth and success. But before we get into the heavy stuff, I want you to picture a regular guy, someone who spent his entire life sweeping floors, fixing broken pipes, and living paycheck to paycheck. Just a humble, everyday janitor. Now, what if I told you that when this guy passed away, he left behind a staggering fortune? It sounds baffling, right? But it's entirely true. Have you ever heard the name Ronald Read? He was an everyday janitor who lived a super quiet, incredibly modest life. And yet, when he died back in 2014, he absolutely shocked everyone who knew him. Why? Well, because Ronald didn't win the lottery, he didn't inherit a dime from some wealthy relative, and he certainly didn't have a Wall Street background or a fancy Ivy League degree. Despite all that, he died with $8 million to his name. Just let that sink in for a second. $8 million. So how on earth does a janitor amass that kind of massive wealth? His secret wasn't some complex trading algorithm. It was simply consistent saving and the relentless, quiet power of compounding over a very long period of time. He just let his money do the work while he kept his own behavior completely in check. Okay, let's dive into this, because Ronald's incredible story perfectly illustrates the core thesis of Morgan Housel's brilliant work. As Housel points out, we kind of need to completely reframe our view of money. Financial success, it's not a hard science. It's not about complex math or having the highest IQ in the room. It's actually a soft skill. It's a game where how you behave is fundamentally way more important than what you know. To master this soft skill, we really need a roadmap. So, here are the 5 psychological keys to wealth we're going to cover today. 1, pay the price. 2, never enough. 3, perspectives. 4, black swans. And 5, the seduction of pessimism. Let's jump right in. Number 1, pay the price, the fee of investing. Think about the last time you wanted to buy, say, a luxury watch. You step up to the counter and you pay a steep fee in cash, right? But buying market returns, that costs something entirely different. The fee for long-term wealth isn't paid in dollars at a register, it's paid in emotional volatility and those stomach-churning drops. Basically, you have to pay the price of admission with your patience, your nerves, and honestly, your sanity. Take Netflix, for example. If you had brilliantly visualized Netflix's future 10 years ago and invested heavily, you'd be sitting on a massive fortune today. But could you have afforded the emotional price tag along the way? Because in 2011, Netflix lost a ton of customers, and its stock plummeted by a brutal 80% from its peak. Just imagine looking at your family knowing your portfolio just dropped by 80%. That is the intense, very real emotional pain required to hold a winning stock long-term. And hey, it's not just risky tech stocks. Even if you took the historically safe route and simply bought a broad S&P 500 index fund back in 1980, you still had to pay a massive psychological fee. Since 1980, you would have spent a combined 13 years with your portfolio down 20%, and a combined 8 months with it down 50%. Wealth creation absolutely does not come for free. It requires a remarkably strong stomach to stay the course. Moving on to Section 2, never enough, the hierarchy of envy. You know, capitalism is exceptionally good at 2 things, generating massive wealth and generating incredibly toxic envy. We enter this really dangerous hierarchy. Let's start with Bill. He's a specialized doctor making $500,000 a year. He's in the top 1%. He feels incredibly rich until he buys a vacation home next to Stan, a CEO making $10 million a year, the top 1% of the 1%. Now, suddenly Bill feels inadequate, but wait, Stan isn't happy either. He plays golf with Michael Jordan, who's worth $2 billion, and Michael Jordan goes to parties with Jeff Bezos, whose net worth explodes by billions a year. There is literally always a bigger fish, making comparisons absolutely endless. And this endless letter of envy is exactly what drives otherwise brilliant people to completely ruin their lives. They use foolish leverage, they engage in insider trading, they risk their families and their freedom, all just to move up one more rung on that pyramid. The vital takeaway you have got to remember is this: we absolutely must not risk something we have and need for something we don't have and don't need. You just have to know when enough is simply enough. Section 3, perspectives, or crazy is in the eye of the beholder. Look, people come from radically different backgrounds and financial realities, right? And that fundamentally shapes how they view money. For instance, look at this stark paradox. The lowest income households in the US spend over $400 a year on lottery tickets.
But at the exact same time, more than a third of Americans cannot afford a $400 unexpected emergency. On the surface, taking your only emergency buffer and blowing it on scratch-offs sounds absolutely insane, doesn't it?
But we actually have to step back and look at it from their perspective. Imagine living paycheck to paycheck, maybe lacking the education or career trajectory to significantly boost your income. You can't afford a nice vacation, a new car, or putting your kids through college without taking on a mountain of debt. For someone living in that reality, buying a lottery ticket isn't a math equation. It's buying the only available ticket to a dream that the rest of us are already living. From their specific lens, it actually feels like a rational choice.
Acknowledging these different lenses is super powerful because it stops us from blindly copying financial strategies that simply do not fit our own personal goals. Like, you shouldn't copy a billionaire's portfolio if your goal is getting rich while their goal is just staying rich. It's the exact same reason you shouldn't jump into a trading frenzy like the whole GameStop saga if you aren't a dedicated day trader. You have to know your perspective and play your own game. Section 4, Black Swans, Preparing for the Unpredictable. Think about monumental historical shocks. The Great Depression, World War II, the 2008 financial crisis, or COVID-19. They had massive market impacts, and they were completely impossible to foresee before they hit. Author Nassim Taleb actually coined the perfect term for these events, black swans. A black swan is an outlier with absolutely no historical precedent. It carries an extreme, world-shifting impact, and here's the really fascinating part. It becomes entirely explainable only after the fact. Human nature constantly fools us into thinking we can predict the next global disaster because our brains naturally just try to connect the dots in hindsight. Now, what's really wild is that there is a massive, permanent cost to thinking you can time the market to avoid these shocks. If you had stayed fully invested in the S&P 500 over a 20-year period, you'd have a 291% return. But if you panicked, tried to jump in and out, and missed just the 4 best-performing days, your return drops all the way down to 164%, just 4 days. So the lesson here is incredibly clear. Stop trying to predict the unpredictable. Honestly, ignore the talking heads making macro-level doom projections on TV. The things that will cause the biggest fear in the future are the things that are super unlikely to be foreseen anyway. Instead, focus entirely on your personal financial resilience. Prepare for disasters mentally and financially so that you can actually survive them when they inevitably arrive. And finally, Section 5, the seduction of pessimism. Why do smart-sounding doomsday predictions capture our attention so much more easily than optimistic data? I mean, think about it. If someone tells you the market is going to crash later this year because of massive government debt, out-of-control inflation, and new global viruses, they sound incredibly intelligent. You lean in, you listen. But if someone tells you that things will just keep getting better because life expectancy is rising and renewable energy is getting cheaper, they sound almost naive, right? We naturally gravitate toward the negative, while long-term slow-moving progress just gets ignored. Why is that? Well, Nobel Prize-winning author Daniel Kahneman explains that our bias toward pessimism is actually a deep, hardwired evolutionary survival trait. Organisms that treat threats as more urgent than opportunities simply have a way better chance to survive and reproduce in the wild. Plus, setbacks and tragedies, they happen overnight. They make for thrilling, dramatic news stories. Progress, on the other hand, happens slowly over decades, making it so much harder to notice day by day. Okay, let's pull this all together in a quick summary. To truly master the soft skills of wealth, you need to remember these 5 critical takeaways today. 1. You must willingly pay the emotional volatility price of investing. 2. Beware the endless envy trap. Know when you have enough. 3. Respect that different people have entirely different financial perspectives. 4. Focus on preparing for disasters, not predicting them. And 5. Actively resist that natural evolutionary seduction of pessimism. Because at the end of the day, it all comes down to mastering your own mindset. So I want to leave you with this final, provocative question as we wrap up this explainer. When you look at your own financial life, are you managing your money, or is your psychology actually managing you? Take a hard look at your daily behaviors, because understanding yourself is where true wealth really begins. Thanks so much for exploring this with me today, and I hope this leaves you eager to keep learning.